Welcome back to Not a Straight Line with me, Pete Daly-Dickson. This is the show that explores the non-linear journeys of artists and entrepreneurs to inspire you as you zigzag through your own non-straight line life. And we're kicking off 2025 with something special. You're about to meet Laura West, a self-proclaimed zigzagger who transformed from a rebellious teenager to a PR director to an agency founder and now stands as a catalyst for change in the agency world. Laura's journey weaves together themes of motherhood, neurodiversity, and an unwavering desire to make a meaningful impact. From quitting her corporate job to ensure she could be there for her son, to her latest venture, transforming how agencies approach charitable giving, this conversation is about finding your path even when it doesn't follow society's straight line. I'm particularly excited to share this episode because my company, Activate Your Potential, has joined Agency Aid as a founding partner. And what better way to kick off this collaboration than with Laura's story on New Year's Day? And if you've ever wondered what happens when you tell an influential business leader you're a blimp pilot who's just crashed outside, well, you're in for a treat. Let's dive into this first episode of 2025. So, as with all beginnings of Not a Straight Line, we're just going to do a short breathing exercise just to bring the three of us into the conversation space before we jump off the deep end. So we'll close our eyes. We'll just do 3 physiological sighs. So a physiological sigh is breathe in twice through the mouth, hold for a second, and then breathe out. Breathe into the nose and then breathe out through the mouth. So just breathe in. Again. The last time. Laura West is in the house for a Not a Straight Line conversation.
Hello.
We finally got here. I postponed once for, I don't know what was going on. We got on a call a couple of weeks ago and you were as sick as a dog.
Yes.
And I didn't want you to have to.
I think you said, shall we do this when you sound and look better? That was my cue to leave.
Well, you sound and look amazing today.
Thanks very much.
So I'm glad we waited. Just for the sake of me and the listener, where are you geographically speaking?
So I'm in Hitchin, which is just north of London. Lovely little town. I've lived here pretty much all my life, actually. I did the thing when I was a teenager, was like, going to London, I'm going to live in London. Got there, couldn't afford to live in London, moved back. So, but yeah, it's a lovely little spot.
I mean, I lost track already of how many zigs and zags you've already brought into the conversation, so we'll cover that. But all of these Not a Straight Line conversations, most of them anyway, start the same way with that question that I send my guests by email a couple of days before. So when you saw that question in the email, what came to mind immediately, or what's coming to mind now for you in terms of that significant moment?
Yeah, so I think for me it was a bit like, which one shall I say? Because I think, and it's only recently in my life I've realised that the zigzag, sort of line that I've followed is all right. I've always thought of it as being really negative. But I think for me the answer to that is especially from a professional perspective. I was single with my son in 2012, and I was working a full-time job. And I just woke up one morning and I thought, I don't feed my son in the week. He goes for breakfast club, he gets fed at lunch and fed dinner at the childminders. And I didn't feed my own child for 5 days out of 7. And I thought, you know what, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be that sort of mum. So I quit my job and I started freelancing. And that's when my agency was born and, things took a change. So I think that for me is the real turn. But, like I said, I've got another 10 if that one doesn't work for you.
And that was in 2012?
That was in 2012, yeah.
Okay, so that kind of gives me a flag in the sand in terms of the storyline. You said in that first little bit that you had always previously thought of the zigs and zags of your life from a negative perspective. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, I've you've been diagnosed ADHD, so have I, and I think that that's been a key key part of it, because I think understanding some of the reasons why I've been like that has been really helpful. But also, you do get to a certain age, or I feel I've got to a certain age where I look at things and think, because of that, that's happened. So there's a positive out of a lot of it. So actually, without having two timelines in your life, you don't know. But I look at most things now as, well, that led on to something positive in this respect. But historically, I'd always seen it as I was a quitter, or I couldn't hold focus, or I didn't have the abilities of other people to sort of really get motivated in certain areas or have a direction. And I think so historically, the sort of zigs and zags felt and as a negative for me. But like I say, now I look back and I think actually, there are some positives out of that. So, and it's life, right?
It is life, yeah. A guest on the podcast, one of the earlier episodes, Ed Dale, he said a wonderful thing on his during our conversation. Is that what he's learned to realize is that life is the zag. That's the whole point of it. I do wonder, in what you said there, Laura, how much the ADHD has to play in it, with this particularly this thing called success blindness. You've come across that, because I've always not thought of myself as a failure, but looking at those things in my life that have potentially been zigs and zags, with a sense of failure and arguably even shame as well. Do you think it is just common for people with ADHD, or do you think it is more part of the human condition, and that for people with ADHD it's just heightened?
Both, yeah. I mean, I think the second, I think it is part of the human condition, because we. I mean, I say we. I'm talking really of our culture, and possibly even being a white person in the UK, coming from I'd say a reasonably middle class background. I'm not going to sort of suggest for everyone, but there is a kind of, not an expectation, but there is a set way of life. This is success. This is not success. And I think so. Most people have a kind of benchmark of success. So if you don't hit it, or it doesn't look like what it's supposed to look like, you do feel like you failed. But I think with people with ADHD, especially our generation, that wasn't a thing when we were younger. So we have generally grown up either feeling or being told you can't stick to anything, or you're not very good at this, or and there's probably many times you think, why can't I just do that? And that's explained with ADHD. So I think the answer is both. I think it's not just an ADHD thing, but I think people with ADHD, especially when we've gone through a life without understanding it or having it diagnosed, it is more intense. Sure, definitely.
I heard the other day, I was speaking to not a guest on the podcast, but somebody who has booked on to become a guest. She's also diagnosed with ADHD, early 50s, diagnosed late in life. And she came across a study that highlighted that a child with ADHD, on average, has received 20,000 more negative messages by the time they're 10 than a child without ADHD. That's a pretty hefty burden to take into adult life.
Yeah, and I'll tell you a story. So I've got 3 kids. My eldest has got ADHD. My middle, who is adopted by me, is autistic, and my youngest, we're just getting diagnosed with ADHD. My sister's daughter has got ADHD and autism. So we've got a lot of neurodiversity in our family, and myself and my sister have done an awful lot of it. We're the type of people who dive into research, learn everything. My sister did that course that got a certification. And subsequently, my mum has then had to learn a lot of stuff, because she is very involved. She's a great nanny. She looks after her kids all the time. So we've had to educate her. And what's been interesting is she's been incredibly accepting of all of our kids' diagnoses, of what they need, and understanding it all. But when it's come to me having ADHD, she's really, really resistant. And I've not really talked to her about it. And now this is going to be awkward when she does listen to this. But I think there is an element of perhaps guilt, because she's got a real understanding of these things in our children, and really kind of accepting, and the traits that may be considered negative, that they're for a reason, and we work with that. And I think there's an element of looking back maybe, and maybe feeling guilty for telling me negative things, and I think that is a big factor as well in our generation, because it is hard to accept. With my middle daughter who's autistic, I look back at some of the times I maybe even sort of ill-treated her. That sounds awful, social services. But let me rephrase that. But, was expecting her to behave a certain way and getting even cross with her for not doing it because I didn't realise at that point she's autistic. And so I look back sometimes, and the only reason I really don't feel guilt, it took me a while, is because I did the right thing and we learned and we've since adjusted. So I think that's a big thing as well. And I think there's a lot of guilt flying around. I think there's a lot of possibly resentment harboured, and I think that's hard. I do, and it has an impact on everything, doesn't it?
Do you think it's impacted also by this perception of the societal norm that life is a straight line?
Yes. And I think that well, I tell you what I think actually. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that anymore. But the not a straight line that is maybe now being more accepted is still, there's still a path. I think my son's just finished GCSEs, and I think when we were younger, you finished GCSEs and you were either smart and did A levels, or you weren't smart and you did something else. That was it. And now there's lots of opportunities. They are forced to stay in education till 18, but that's another story. That's another podcast. But there's lots more opportunities. And for me, I think when he started school, I had you've got to get A's because you're clever. And as he went through school and as I'm sort of learning about life and life's changing, there's so many more avenues and opportunities. So I think it's not a straight line anymore, but I do think the expectations and what measures success are still there. So there's pathways. So perhaps there are straight lines, but there's lots of them, maybe. So, which I don't know whether that makes it harder or easier, to be honest. I'll let you know.
Yeah. And what's your earliest memory of taking a zag where there was a sense of there was a negative connotation which you put on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think even like in school, I look back and it's kind of a running joke. I was rebellious but I mean, never to the point of being horrendously bad. I never got expelled. I didn't really even get many detentions, but I always had a question. I always pushed back on everything. And looking back, I think part of that was because I felt, I was in defense mode a lot because, I got told I was not very good at things. And so even in school, I would change directions constantly in terms of my interests, in terms of my friendship groups, in terms of what I was doing, even my dress, my dress sense. I went from a goth to a raver, back to almost like I loved reggae for a while. And I think looking back, I did that almost out of spite, because I didn't want people to put me in a box. So I was almost like, screw you, I'll do something different then. So I think I was constantly like that, but didn't necessarily realise why I was doing it.
Did you enjoy school?
Do you know what? Yes and no. I always enjoyed the sounds awful. I enjoyed the struggle of school. I say this quite a lot, and I think I've got to be careful, but I was bullied at school, but I wasn't bullyable. So, and the way I sort of say that, there were people in school who were horrible to me. I had all the classic bullying stuff. I kicked in the corridor, people shouting at me, being horrible to me. But I always fought back. So it was never recognised as bullying. And I think that had a big effect on me. So I didn't enjoy school in that respect. But actually, I did enjoy the struggle of school. Is that, I don't know how to explain it. But so yes and no is the answer.
When you say had a big impact on you, in what way?
Well, I think, again, it's a lot of hindsight stuff. If I look back on my life, and I'm sure lots of people do this, there's lots of stuff I thought I felt a certain way, but actually in hindsight, I didn't feel that way, and it actually affected other parts of my life. I was quite a defensive person in my late teens, especially. I was not in any way aggressive, but I was always ready to fight. And I did channel that into sort of, some activist stuff and what have you. But I was very, very kind of, I was spoiling for a go on, say something I don't agree with kind of thing as a teen. And yeah, it did affect me.
Affected you then, or affects you now still?
Both. I mean, it affected me then because I think I was put into a box. People, Laura's gobby, Laura's this, Laura's that. And, the way people perceive you, I think, does make you act a certain way. You tend to either butt against it or go with it. And then as I got older, I mellowed, obviously, because I got tired. And I sort of, but again, like I say, I look back and think, well, some of my behaviours and some of the way I was because of defensiveness, not just because, that's the way I was. So, when I say affected me, I don't necessarily mean, I've had to dive into counselling for it, but it's interesting to look back at something and think it wasn't the way you thought it was. And I mean, I've done it a few times. I wonder if I went back in time and knew certain things, would I be a different person? And obviously, that's silly. We can't do that, and you can't spend your life doing that. But yeah, it is interesting looking back.
Did you enjoy school from an academic or sporting perspective? I mean, what lit the young Laura up?
Do you know? Again, so I was clever. A bit like my son. I was able to achieve quite, I suppose, great high grades essentially without putting in too much effort. At GCSE level, I was told that I wasn't going to achieve very highly because I didn't concentrate, I didn't do very much, and so purely out of spite, I secretly revised. I mean, this is a running joke between my friends, actually. I did the opposite. So people, that when people have a study book open, but there's a mag inside, I'd do the opposite. I'd have a study book with a mag on the outside so nobody knew what I was doing. Purely out of spite, I got straight A's by one grade at GCSE. And everybody was like, what? And I literally did it as a screw you to the teachers and a little bit to my family. And then it got to A level and I couldn't be asked anymore. To be honest, I discovered boys. I discovered, drinking. I discovered going out. And at that point, I couldn't be bothered. So my A levels, I didn't do as well by a long shot.
But so when you're doing your GCSEs, though, you got straight A's across the board. Was there any particular subjects that you were drawn to? The arts, the sciences, the humanities?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I was always drawn to drama, but I was always put off of drama because everyone told me, oh, you'll be drawn to drama because you're dramatic, and all this stuff. So that defensive resistance, I actually backed away from drama a lot because it was what people expected me to do. But maths and science were my ones. I found maths and science incredibly easy and I really enjoyed them. And I suppose that's one of those looking back. I think if I'd have known more about myself, that's something if I could go back, I'd change because I think I could have had an amazing career in sciences, but didn't because that wasn't on the agenda at that point. I was trying to annoy someone with something else at that point.
We've explored a little bit of the younger Laura. I want to jump forward in time to 2012 when you had this realization that 5 days out of 7 you weren't feeding your son. What work were you doing at the time then?
I was working as a PR director for a company, and I'd had quite I suppose, a normal-ish progression in my career at that point. I'd left university, didn't really know what I wanted to do. A friend of mine said, oh, you should probably work in PR because I think she said they go out drinking a lot and you like drinking. So I think that's why I started a career in PR. And by the normal progression, I was, I sort of worked up and up and up and was quite high level PR at this company. I've been working there about a year. I did enjoy the work. I really did. I enjoyed the company. I enjoyed the work and I enjoyed my colleagues. But the stress of being a mum was quite high. There wasn't any other parents in the company working like I was at that point. And yeah, it just hit me, I think, that you can't do, I thought, you can't do both. You can't do both. I'd traveled a few times. I'd been to America, I think, sort of 4 times in 6 months. And my mum had had to look after my son, or he went to his dad. And yeah, I think I really enjoyed it, but I thought I can't do both, and I had to choose. And the mum guilt got the better of me, I think. I stopped working there, and I started freelancing. I was working in the games because I'd been working in the same industry for quite a long time. The freelance work wasn't too difficult because I knew lots of people, so I didn't worry too much about getting a little bit of work. It then kind of grew, as a lot of agencies do. I sort of went from freelance. I got quite a lot of referral work, and then I turned it into an agency, and I do that in kind of in the loosest sense.
Why do you put air quotes around it?
Because I think I mean, nowadays it's okay, but at the time, you had to pretend you were bigger than you are. Your website had to have more people on it than were working for you. I had freelancers working for me, but it was very much positioned as we had a lovely office. We didn't. So that's why I say it like that. But yeah, I mean, that's how it started. And it was scary, but actually, again, I think this is a bit of an ADHD thing. Other people were more worried about it than I was. I was always very much like, I'll be all right. I'll be all right. It'll be all right. Be fine. If I lost a client, I'd kind of go, oh, but I'll be all right. I'll get another one. So, and I don't know if it's naivety or wishful thinking. It was all right, actually, but yeah.
It begs the question, is it naivety? Is it optimism? Is it ADHD? Is it a combination of all of that? Because I tend to have that outlook as well. It's like, I think it's summed up in the phrase, good or bad, who can say?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I am not so naive that I don't, I have a great family. I do, my family has some wealth. I have lived my life knowing I have a safety blanket if I need it. And I think that plays a big part as well. I think it's obnoxious to say, I'll be all right, and everyone should feel like that, because there are people who don't have that. So I had that safety blanket. So I do need to sort of caveat that my risk taken and my blasé attitude was, kind of backed up by worst case scenario. Mum will pay my mortgage for a month. So, I do want to caveat that. I'm not,
Yeah, no, I
haven't worked for a single child. It wasn't that bad.
I get that. Although there is still, when you're in the middle of shit, it can seem like that's the way it's always been and the way that's always going to be. But just having a sense that, this too shall pass, good or bad, who can say? It's how you respond to the stuff that's happening to you that dictates the quality of your life, not what's actually happening to you.
It does, yeah. I mean, I think, like I said, I think that is dependent slightly on your situation as well, because I think, it's all well and good saying that, but if there are situations that this too shall pass might not be the case unless something dramatic happens, which you might not have control over. So I think, like I said, I do recognise my privilege, and I do recognise that my saying that is different to perhaps other people's position.
Was there any sense of rebelling against that when you were younger?
No, not really. I think no. I mean, I think my sort of family situation, again, I was very lucky. I was very privileged, lovely parents. My dad passed away, but looking back, I think if we'd have had diagnosis back then, he'd have been ADHD for sure. So he and I clashed quite a lot. But no, I mean, I was lucky with my parents, really lucky. My rebellious nature was sort of taken on the chin, and it was very like, oh, it's Laura, which, like we said, going back might have been a negative thing, but, positive at the time.
What do you remember about your dad that makes you think that he was probably had ADHD characteristics?
Well, he and I were, or I am very similar to how he was in some of his traits and what have you. And actually, the one thing I think really stands out for me, before I realised my son had ADHD, I used to get really annoyed with some of his traits that I recognised came from me. And I think especially if you're undiagnosed, you do kind of go through life thinking, this is annoying about me. I wish I wasn't like this. And then the sort of projection onto your child of, why are you now like this? And he was quite like that with me. He didn't like certain traits in me that were very clear in him, and that sort of projection. So I think there was a bit of that as well. But yeah, I mean, he was very much, he wanted to be an actor, he wanted to do all this stuff. He was very flamboyant, but inside, he really struggled with a lot of things. He'd constantly have interests and what have you. And then drop them like hot stones. It's just very, I think there's a lot of similarities.
Yeah. When you've lived it and you have the lens of diagnosis for understanding what you've lived through, you can then see it in other people.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, we kind of know that there's a hereditary nature to some of these kind of neurodiversities. I mean, it is too easy to go, oh, you're autistic, you've got ADHD, you've got that, because, and one of the things I think someone told me once as a description, which I love, is neurodiversity. So if you had a bucket and there was balls that go in kind of columns, and each one of the columns is a characteristic, a trait, a neuro trait. people can have loads of different balls in all of them, but only when you hit the line at the top for all of them are you that neurodiversity. And I think that's an interesting a model, because you could have this one, which is huge, all the others low. And so people say, well, you've got this characteristic, so you've probably got this. But actually, you've just got that characteristic, and I think that's a sort of interesting thing. And I think that, a lot of people get annoyed when, another one with ADHD. But, because it is bandied around quite a lot. But yeah, I mean, people can have characteristics all over the place, can't they? It's not exclusive to people with ADHD or,
Do you, how long ago did you get your diagnosis?
Only a year. So.
Okay. And how's your life been different since the diagnosis?
To be honest, it hasn't really, other than a lot more understanding. And I think from other people, and I think as well, a little bit less beating myself up about things. But realistically, not massively. And I don't think actually, having kids with neurodiversities as well, I'm not sure the world changes. I think what happens is that there is an acceptance from the world around you and yourself. But, I've had this conversation lots of times with this kind of catch-22 thing of, is knowing, this is a big one, is knowing something and being accepted for it almost an invitation to have, to express that trait more and therefore make your life more difficult? Or, if we go back in time to when things weren't accepted and you kind of maybe repress stuff or fit in with society a bit more, whether that, and it's an interesting conversation because, especially my autistic daughter, we look at her sometimes and, we help her so much fit into the world around her. It's really hard for her, socially at school. She really struggles with a lot of stuff. But we also have sort of talked about the fact that, if she wasn't so aware of some stuff, would she be able to cope with things better? And it's just, I'm not saying that it's better. It's just an interesting dynamic, I think.
It's all about having an ever greater awareness and understanding of ourselves, how we are and who we are. Do you medicate at all?
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting thing, actually, because having a medication that actually helps. I remember when my son first took his, he came home and he said, I didn't feel like I came up. But at the end of the day, because I think he was expecting to sort of say something and go, whoa, but at the end of the day, I felt so different. Like I felt like, I could concentrate and I could do more stuff. And so I think, and it is a big thing, having something that can help you in certain areas to do. Yeah. I mean, it is great to have.
Well, I started down the medication route and didn't get on very well with the two that they tried, and I stopped. Was your path to medication easy, or did it take?
Really easy. But I get that, and I think so. My niece, who's got ADHD and autism, the interesting thing there is quite a lot of the, I suppose, difficult kind of the struggles you have with an autistic mind are almost counterbalanced by the mind of an ADHD person. So she's got, don't get me wrong, she has real struggles, bless her, and she's excellent. But some of her ADHD kind of neuro things counteract. So it's interesting because my sister's sort of like, she's medicated a bit, but she doesn't want to medicate her fully because actually, this sort of counterbalance works quite nicely for her in many ways. So I think it's each their own person. Everybody, and that's the thing with all of these things, neurodiversities, neurotypical, whatever. Everybody is different. There's a personality and a person behind anything. So you can't say, well, this works for this type of person. I think it's nice that there is medications for some people that it works for, but it's not to say that it's not cure, is it? So.
The first medication I had was a slow release, and my body wasn't metabolizing it correctly, so I was getting the full dose in the first hour. It was
clean the house. The house is spotless, though.
It's weird. It felt like I'd smoked a spliff, and it was just horrible.
Oh,
but
right.
I did it for 10 days because I had to take, and got the end of it. My wife was like, just please, that's not right. Something don't. So I know it can be difficult for people.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? I think, although, again, going back to that bucket thing, although there are, we know that certain things happen if you've got ADHD, or certain things exist if you're autistic or whatever. And so there are markers that we can say, well, we can maybe do something about this. But everybody's brain is different, and the way you not just think, but the way you kind of, like you say, metabolize things is different. So there is no way that anyone could come up with a medication that would work for everyone.
No.
And actually, some people don't want that. We've medicated something that we've seen as a problem. But I think we are, as a society as well, moving towards lots of proactive things, and lots of positive things about perhaps these different types of brains. So maybe we don't medicate it, we just harness it.
Yeah, harness, absolutely. And who decides what's typical and divergent anyway?
Oh yeah. I mean, my husband always says he can't understand how I can. He can't understand how I can tell him what someone's going to say to what he says. Because my empathy levels are. I get people. I really do. And so he might say.
And the ADHD brain is also able to instantaneously see everything and join all the dots at the same time.
So he might send a text to someone, and I'll say, oh, they're going to read it like this. And what? And then they'll come back. And I mean, we had one instance where I told him what the person was going to say back, and it was word for word. He was like, how? He can't do that. And, coming up with things on the spot, my brain works so fast that, I can come up with things on the fly, no problem. He will stand there and be like, give me a minute.
And would your husband, what's your husband's name?
Peter.
Oh, easy to remember. Would he be described as neurotypical?
Yes, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you ever, how long have you been married?
We haven't been married that long. We've been together 10 years.
Right. And do you ever wonder how you are still together after 10 years?
Yeah, all the time. I think we both
do. There's something in life. I think if you say something enough times and put it out there enough times, then it has a better chance of becoming real. So I'm a podcaster. I do podcasts. It's part of who I am. And my wife and I have talked about a podcast because my wife would also identify as neurotypical.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea for this podcast, the name is "How the Fuck Are We Still Married?"
Yeah, I like it already. Yeah.
And I don't think you have to be like a neurodivergent, neurotypical couple either. I just think that the difference between male and female is enough to ask yourself the question:
absolutely.
How the fuck are we still married? So let me ask you that question: How the fuck are you and Peter still married or still together?
Well, I think the key to it is, and we do say this quite a lot, the things that probably would break us are actually the things that keep us together. So my nature is I'm quite controlling. I like to do everything. I like to be in charge of everything. I like to, run the show. That's my thing. I'm not very good at letting other people do anything. Peter, by nature, if someone else will do it, I'll have a seat. So that plays to our strength. When we're not having a nice time, you never do anything, and he'll, oh, you're so controlling, I can't do it right. So we have this kind of constant battle, but actually, in essence, we have found the person that we fit with. And I think, in kind of the more lucid moments, we realize it might be annoying at times, but that's more to do with our own personalities than each other's. We're more annoyed of ourselves. I'm more annoyed if Pete's not done anything. Essentially, I'm more annoyed that I've let him do that all these years, or if I'm shouting at him for not putting the washing in right or whatever, he's more annoyed that he didn't do it in the first place, and he's put himself in this position. So,
how and where did you meet?
We met in a caravan park in Great Yarmouth.
Wow, that's about as romantic as it gets, I think.
It is, yeah. No, he's the cousin of one of my friends, and we'd gone on a sun holiday, a £9.50 sun holiday, me and my friend and a few others, and she just brought her cousin along. And so we met in a holiday park in Yarmouth. And then he lives close to where I live, and we got together properly when we got back. But yeah, I rang my mum and said, I think I've met a man in a caravan park in Yarmouth. And she went, oh no. It's all right.
And what did you see in him that made you make that call to your mum?
Do you know what? He might listen to this, so I don't want to say, because we had a constant argument about who liked each other more first.
Well, let's put it to rest now, because this is going to be the official record.
Okay, well, in that case, annoyingly, it was me that chased him. So I will admit it. I'm not really sure. Honestly, we both said as well, because we were both on dating apps, and we both looked at each other's profiles and would never have swiped right or left or whatever it is on each other.
Isn't that
It is funny,
interesting?
isn't it? What you think you want and what you think you don't want.
And would you say that your profiles were fairly, that you weren't kind of masking, they're pretty authentic?
No, yeah. Well, we thought we were. Yeah, I mean,
Right.
we thought we were saying, but yeah, he was nothing that I thought I would want. And same with me, with him, so yeah, it's odd, isn't it? But
it's really interesting because in this world of primarily virtual connection, you have a LinkedIn profile and whatever, and you do your best to, present the authentic you, but it's probably going to be exactly the same thing. How do we cut through that? How do we find out who these humans are behind these online profiles?
Well, we can't. The kind of the beauty and the I nearly said Beauty and the Beast then. The good and the bad thing, I think, is when you're given the opportunity to present yourself, you are going to present the good stuff. Same as you wouldn't write on LinkedIn. I'm having a really shit. Well, you might, but it's for a reason. You present yourself in the way you want people to see you, and that might not be real. But at the same time, why should we? I've got close friends who I'm slightly different around. Not that I'm not presenting my true self, but different parts of me are best with those people. So I think I don't like this idea that you've got to show your authentic self on LinkedIn. It's like, yeah, sure, don't bullshit. Don't say you can do stuff you can't do. But why should I tell everyone on LinkedIn everything about myself? I'll tell you what I want you to see, because that's how social media works. I'm not lying. I'm not going to say I'm an Olympic sprinter, but at the same time, I'm not going to tell you every shit thing I've done this week. Because why should I? None of your business. So yeah,
it's only ever going to be a short list, though, isn't it?
It's going to be a really short list. I'm pretty perfect.
I have a hypothesis about how to cut through it, and that is to have more better quality conversations with more people. That you actually the way that you realized that you and Peter realized that you weren't what you were seeing online is probably because you had conversations with each other.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I think the more that we can all do to create environments where high quality conversations, and you pulled me up before we hit record about what does a high quality conversation look like. So okay, well let me ask you, what does a quality conversation look and sound like to Laura West?
Well, I mean, I find this quite interesting because obviously I'll go back to LinkedIn. I am myself on LinkedIn to an extent. I don't try and be a character or anything like that. So it is me. And some people do like it and what have you. But I've had quite a few people when I've had Zoom conversations or what have you be more, I suppose, more drawn to me or like me more because I'm, like I say, much more myself. I don't put on a kind of facade. I don't put on a front.
There's not much filter there.
No, there's no filter. And again, looking back, there used to be a lot when I was younger. Again, this is a big topic about growing up in a misogynistic environment. So maybe another podcast. But I don't sort of present myself in any other way than myself. So I totally agree with you. Having good conversations is good. When I go to networking events, I will be myself, and people generally kind of do like that because there is a bit of a facade with people. So I totally agree with it. The difficulty is how to have them, I suppose, for people, how to do that, because there is so much, I don't want to use the word bullshit, but there's so much like salesy stuff, I suppose. Like I was saying to you the other day, there's so much kind of rubbish around why people want to talk to you, so it is tricky. But I mean, ultimately, just don't be an arsehole.
Yeah. You just said something there inadvertently, which made me smile as you said it, just because it's indicative of the time blindness of ADHD. You said to me something that you said to me the other day, and you only said it to me like half an hour ago.
What?
About the salesy stuff.
Oh right, yeah.
Yeah. We had that conversation before I hit record.
Why
Yeah, but
not?
it's like,
I
but
don't-
time blindness is like it's not happening now. So whether it happened like half an hour ago or the other day, it doesn't matter, does it?
I can't remember what I said 10 minutes ago. So
You didn't do very well at A level, you said, but you obviously did well enough to get into university to study something. Did you get to study what you wanted to, or
wow. I mean, that's my university journey wasn't straightforward either. So I didn't get the grades I wanted to get into the university I wanted to. So I wanted to actually, ironically, I was saying about science, I was going to go and do biology because I had this idea that I wanted to be a geneticist. I wasn't really sure what a geneticist was, but it sounded really cool. And I didn't get in to do the course I wanted. So I went into clearing and I got onto a different course, it was biology focused, but it was actually about food production in the first year. And then it went on to biology. And the first year was in this college in York. It was Leeds University, but the first year was in this college in York, which was attached to a farm. And I went and I got very, very depressed, very depressed. It was an environment I was comfortable in. I didn't really feel I belonged there. I didn't really like the course. And actually, my mum came up and got me because I lost so much weight. I wasn't very well. I didn't recognize it at the time, but my mum came and got me and actually quit university for me because she didn't think I was healthy. And I came back and said, I don't want to do university. Then I'll go and get a job. And I got a job in a warehouse. I rented a flat with my boyfriend, and I think I'd been there a month, and I'd signed a 6 to 12 month lease. It's going back to help my parents as my safety blanket. And I called my mum and I said, actually, I think I want to go to uni. I don't think I want to work in a warehouse. I don't really like it. So I'm going to go back to school. And I went back to my school and did another 2 A levels to get into university again. And then I went back to university when I was 21 and did a course in film and television studies at Brunel, which I did really enjoy. Came out.
so hang on a second. We've gone from woo, fantastic.
Yeah.
I love it. An archetypal guest. So just talk me through that zag from biology, hard science, to film and television. And what A levels did you go back to take?
Yeah, well, that's even funnier. So I came back and I did economics and business, obviously. I'd done maths, art, and biology, and done okay. And then I came back and I went back to school and I did business and economics and I can't remember what I got actually. I think A's and B's, and then thought I'll go back to university. And honestly, I looked at the course in a brochure, and the picture of the girl in next to this course, she looked really happy, and I literally applied because she looked really happy, and so I did that course.
And were you as happy as she at the end?
I really enjoyed the course, actually. It was very easy for me. I did enjoy my time at university. I was in a different place. I met lots of nice people, so I had a proper university experience then. But I was a bit older, and again, I think that made a big difference. Going to university when you're 18 was very different to going when I was 21. So I did have a different experience, a different time, and I had the proper university experience though, and I did enjoy it. But I came out with a degree in film and television, and then went, well, what am I going to do now? Because that qualifies me for nothing. So my friend said, "You like drinking? Go and get a job in PR."
Well, I mean, you could arguably say that about any degree. You come out, it's just like maybe unless you've been studying to be a doctor or a dentist.
Yeah, exactly. Unless it's vocational, absolutely. But yeah, so that was where I went. So there we go.
Seems to be a very impulsive, and these aren't negative. There's no negative connotations at all. Kind of just impulsive, like just spur of the moment.
Yeah,
Quite ADHD traits. Not
very, yeah.
But was there? I guess what I'm getting at is that was there any more thought than? I mean, smiling girl on the brochure is a nice story, but was it really just that, or did you have a sense that there was tapping into something that was in you?
Well, I think, I mean, the girl on the brochure was kind of, moment. And I think the course itself, honestly, seemed interesting and something I could do. And because
what did you see in it that made it seem interesting to you?
They'd worded it very well, clearly in the brochure, and it was about the psychology of. I mean, the degree itself, useless it was. It was quite interesting about the psychology of film and TV. There was a little bit about the practical side of it, but it was more about the study of film and TV. And it just sounded interesting to me. Bearing in mind, I'm sort of 20 at this point. it just sounded sort of interesting. And I think as well, I was in that bracket where we were just starting to see more interesting courses. 5 years before there was like 10 courses, and this was probably fell into that category. Oh, it's a bit different. It's a bit interesting. So yeah, I think it was that, and it seemed doable. I think as well, it seemed easy.
Was that partly mitigating a possibility of you dropping out again? Did you want it? Did you not? Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. I didn't want it.
Safe choice.
Yeah, exactly. The safe choice. Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to do university. I wanted to have a degree because that felt like we were saying earlier, that the straight line path, that seemed like the goal. I should be getting a degree. But yeah, possibly to mitigate against failure, or, what have you. Let's do something a bit more fun and interesting. So, but yeah, that's where I went with that.
Has that desire to mitigate potential failure, do you recognize that at any other parts of your life, any other times in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've possibly not taken risks because of that, but at the same time, I can say I've taken massive risks that I know I'll fail. So I think it's you sort of said it, impulsive decisions. I do make quite impulsive decisions, not so much now actually. Now I'm older and I've got lots of kids, but certainly when I was early 20s to mid 30s, I mean, I would make decisions and do it that day. Again, a bit of a running joke among my friends and family, but yeah, I mean, I always did that. If I felt like doing something, I'd just do it that day, and I couldn't understand why other people didn't do it.
What's the worst that can happen?
That's what I always used to say. That's what I used to say. Nobody died. We're fine. But yeah, I mean, I'd done all sorts. I'd travelled off the back of that. Just booked tickets and gone somewhere. I used to regularly book flights, but no accommodation, because I thought, well, I'll see what'll happen when I get there. And it used to scare the shit out of my mum. When I took my son when he was 3, I booked flights. I did book the flights. I booked flights to Bali, a couple of stop-offs. I had friends in Hong Kong, so we stopped there. But I didn't book any accommodation. I was just like, oh, we'll see what happens. And I just had a 3-year-old with me. And I had a backpack and a toddler carrier. And we just went around Bali. And my mum was terrified. But I was like, what's the worst that can happen? It's quite a nice country. There's going to be places to stay. I'm all right, And it was fine,
What was a highlight from that trip?
Oh, it was so good, that trip. That was one of my favourite trips. I mean, for me, travelling with my 3-year-old was amazing, because we got to do, he swam with turtles, he met monkeys and elephants, and it just felt so cool, just taking him around and doing all this stuff. I mean, actually, Bali is incredibly safe and incredibly touristy, so it was fine. But yeah, it was lovely. But that sort of set us on our way until I met Peter. We did loads of travelling. We went to India. We travelled around the whole of bottom half of India. And again, that wasn't really planned. One day we just decided we'll go and hire a houseboat. So we did, it was great.
Did you travel growing up as a child?
Not massively. We holidayed, but we didn't travel. I suppose travel is different to holidaying. But I was privileged. We did go on holiday sort of 2-3 times a year. So certainly traveling wasn't ever a kind of big thing for me in terms of being scary or being, unachievable. But I don't do that anymore because I can't afford it. I've had too many kids now. I can't wear them all, so they're not coming.
So we did start down a conversation route earlier on. This is really testing my attention skills, this conversation. Like,
honestly,
it's bad enough when it's just me that's got ADHD, but when the guest has as well, it's like, oh, okay, let's keep on this.
My husband said the other day, me and my son were sat at the table. The 3 of us were sat having dinner, and me and my son were talking, and my husband went, oh my God, I can't do this. And we were both talking about different things, but also answering each other at the same time. And my husband was like, and he was like, I can't. Like, what? It's fine.
We started talking a little bit earlier on the importance of good conversation.
Yes.
And how that is the way of sort of cutting through to the realness of people that we see virtually. And I asked you the question, which we started to explore before we went off another tangent, which is fine, because it's not a straight line by name, and it's not a straight line by nature, both the life stories we're talking about and also the conversation itself. You talked about the difficulty, your desire to have good quality conversations with people at networking events stuff, but that can be a challenge to do that. So we'll talk about that in a second. But you understand that your life's going to be better, betterer.
It's going to be more better, yeah.
more better with more quality conversations with more people. So what does a good conversation look like to Laura? Who are you talking to? What are you talking about? What makes it a good quality? Deep? Is that a word that you'd use in there as well? Just what's the word that we want to come up with to describe these kind of conversations, Laura?
Well, I think that I, again, you're going to wish you hadn't asked me this now. I think there's 3 types of conversation I like having. One conversation is deep and personal, and that is very specific to people I want to have that conversation with. The second conversation I like having is around work and around what I'm doing and what other people are doing in a work capacity. And then the third conversation is I really like having conversations with people I wouldn't normally talk to, and learning stuff about stuff I wouldn't normally, come into contact with. So I think those are the 3 conversations I like having. So, but in a kind of work capacity, in a networking capacity, I think the biggest problem I come across, and I think other people come across, is there's a line between having a conversation which benefits you in terms of your work, your business, and it not being stale as fuck. And then having a conversation that's chatty and lovely and you get to know someone, but you leave and there's no ability to link in a work capacity. And I see people doing it all the time. And I'm guilty of it as well. But yeah, I think those 2 things are, people find them really hard to connect. Because does a quality conversation actually revolve around talking about work? Generally not. Even if what you do is a solution for my business, do I want to talk about that outside of a meeting about it? Probably not. So, it's about being a bit more human, I suppose, and be a bit more personal, but without it being either weird or forgettable.
I mean, this is ostensibly a business podcast. It's one of the categories on Apple Podcasts, but we haven't spoken too much about business. And yet, by the same token, anyone that was thinking of working with you, hearing this conversation between you and me would probably give them a pretty good idea about whether they should stay clear of you completely.
Yeah, thanks. Not that
or whether they should pick up the proverbial phone and give you a call. And I think that's ultimately what I am. I wouldn't go so grandiose to say that's my mission, but I think that's what is at the heart of what I was talking to you about before I hit record, is that I want to help. I say I don't want to grandiose it. It's like I was saying, I want to help the world.
I just want to be on the fire, for God's sakes. Is it too much?
I want to give people the tools and the space to have ever better quality conversations with ever more people, because I'm convinced that if that is the case, that more people will get what they want. They will be able to be, do, and have whatever they want.
I agree. But I will say one thing that does bother me is there are people, and I put myself in this category, and I put you into this category, who are reasonably confident and can talk and can, have conversations without too much trouble. And there are other people who find that more difficult. And I think there's so much advice for people. Be like this, be like this, be like this, talk like this, do this, put this out there. And actually, one thing I think is so important is, like, what do you want to achieve from conversations as well? I totally agree there should be quality conversations, but word quality is just a reference point for, something good. It's not a specific thing. If you've got a product, for instance, having a drink with someone and making them laugh isn't going to sell your product to them. If your product's shit and it's not going to work for the business, it doesn't matter if they think you're great. If your product or your whatever is more about you as a person working directly with you, putting you at the forefront of something, then it is more about you. So I think, understanding what you want to achieve from conversations is really important. But the flip side is what other people want to get from you as well. And a lot of people miss that. What does the other person want to hear from me? And I'm guilty of talking too much. But on the whole, I can kind of judge, how much you want me to say and how much you don't want me to say, what we should talk about. And a lot of people are bad at that. A lot of people, just misjudging things, misjudging, the room. So I think, it's about those 2 things. What do you want to get from it, realistically? And what does the other person want to get from you?
So we're starting to build up a definition of a quality conversation,
Yeah.
which is great. So I'm going to get good content from this conversation,
Exactly.
as the listener will also. So part of it is deciding what you want.
Mhm.
With those different types of conversations, obviously the third type you mentioned, I guess your outcome is I'm going to learn something that I didn't know before. There's somebody who's knowledgeable about something. And I love those kind of conversations as well, because you can just you just bring your natural curiosity to the conversation. And it's like, oh wow, I'm hearing stuff that I didn't know before. So when you say that, what do you mean? And that's really interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, from a business sense, it can sometimes lead other places. You might learn something that, or meet someone, or be introduced to someone who you wouldn't have normally, but it actually leads on to something else. But you don't go into those things with a clear business, agenda. But they're fun.
Is that the point? I guess what I'm trying to get to is, isn't that part of the problem, that people who are in business are thinking that they have to talk about business to other business people to figure out about whether they're going to do business? Isn't that the problem? Isn't it about, well, why don't we have a conversation to see whether we
Whether we like each other.
whether we like each other,
Yeah.
whether there's a vibe, and then we can get it in that conversation, in that relationship. You're not going to go straight from zero to, you don't get married on your first date. That's the classic cliche. It's like you have a conversation with someone, and if you get on, then you probably want to have another conversation with them, and then the quality of those conversations, because of the quantity of those conversations, is probably going to increase. And at some point in time, you will figure out whether one of you has got problems or stuff happening in their business, which the other is going to be able to sort them out with, help them with.
Yes, but so let's put it this way. So if I have a great conversation with someone, I'll remember them because they're really cool and they're really nice and they've made me laugh or whatever.
Yeah. So like this one, you mean?
Like this one, definitely won't forget this one, and that's great. But if I don't need what you do in my business, I don't need it. Like there isn't. People don't work with people just because they like them. I mean, that just doesn't happen. But if I know what you do and it's really clear to me what you do, I'll remember it and I might recommend you. And that's the bit that people miss. It's not, you don't always have to talk to people who are definitely going to use your service. But if they like you and you've been very clear, as I was saying earlier, very clear about what you do, I do this, it does this, this is this, well, I don't need the cost, whatever. Then you stay in my memory. If someone says to me, oh, Jill, I really need to talk to someone about podcasts, I don't necessarily want to do a podcast, but okay, I know someone. And so it's more about that. So having those quality conversations with people, like I said, what is the outcome of this? Do I want to do business with this specific person, or do I want to be in this person's mind? And it's knowing those things.
Is it about approaching conversations with people from you've used the term already, networking, but rather than networking, actually think about it as network building. So I'm actually building this network around me of people that I'm having ever better quality conversations with. I'm getting an ever better understanding of not only who they are and how they are, but also why they're doing what they're doing. And then there's the what is in there as well. We've got to know what they do. And that the more quality conversations you have with more people, the stronger your network is, and the more likelihood there is of people in your network referring stuff to you, because you've got people talking about you behind your back.
Then there's another step for me. The next step, and again, loads of people don't do it, is just being really frank and upfront. Because there's a lot of people who have lots of these conversations and they've got an agenda of sorts, but they never get to it. So, if you've built up a rapport with someone and you think, it'd be great if you refer me, ask them, tell them that's what you want from them. Tell people what you want from them. Once you've got to a point where you've got a relationship of sorts, don't just be someone they thought it was quite nice to chat to, because that is a waste then,
So I guess it's a bit like me, and any guest who comes on the show that has listened to a previous episode will know that I ask a question at the end of every episode, which is effectively what you're saying there. I ask my guest to give me the name of someone who they know would probably like to have this kind of conversation. So like Yeah. So I'm doing what Laura told me to do.
Well, you want me to answer that now?
No. I'm saying that is about being specific.
Yeah.
So I'm asking for, effectively, I ask for a referral after every conversation that I have with someone, and that's part of it. That's part of this formula. I think there's some kind of formula or process taking shape in my head, and that's
it is. I mean, I think there's loads of sort of steps to it, and again, I'm not trying to say it's really formulaic, because I think once you get something that's too processy or formulaic, it becomes really stale. But having the outcome in your mind of anything is important. What outcome I want, and the other outcomes that it could be, and kind of knowing how to deal with that, because otherwise things get lost. Let's drill this down to new biz, right? You want to kind of drive more business, you want more leads, etc. There are loads of different ways of doing it, but do it in the way that's like, well, what's the outcome of this? And conversations are so important, but if they're not real or not, like you say, quality, they're pointless. But then don't just have them and then let them drop off into the ether. It is a bit of a process, but just, I think, being honest, be honest about what you want as well, because nobody really is in a position to sort of have a judgment on anyone else, if you know what I mean. If you say, I need some referrals, I'm not doing very well, I haven't had any business for a while, generally speaking, people will like that honesty. They'll like the fact that you're asking them, or you're talking to them about it. So yeah, that.
So was it just the drinking that attracted you to PR, or was there other aspects of it that made you think it would be a good fit?
Well, PR was very different back then. I was actually saying to someone recently, my first ever PR job, where you had to fax the press release and post the different things and fax press release and stuff. So it was a different world, and you'd get good reviews by essentially taking journalists out and getting them really drunk, and then getting them to promise you good reviews at the end. But that was back in the day. Yeah, I think PR is a bit more tricky these days, isn't it?
So it was just the drinking then?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I didn't know anything about PR. I mean, my very first job, I blagged my way in on the interview, and didn't know what I was doing at all. Then my second job, I'd done a co PR campaign with another PR firm, with a company actually that had a PR arm. And the MD, we went out for a drink afterwards, and the MD got really drunk and put his head in my chest and basically did that. And as he looked up at me, there's obviously a sudden realization that this is not acceptable, and he offered me a job and said, I'll give you $5,000 more. And I was like, all right. So that's how I got my second job. And I didn't know what I was doing, so I learned on the fly.
What is PR? I mean, I've been around the sun quite a few times, and I hear this word, and it's kind of PR and marketing is kind of all lumped in together. What the fuck is PR?
Well, PR really, I mean, the definitions of everything's changed, because when I first started, PR was one thing, marketing was another thing. It was just one thing. So it's all very much changed. But PR essentially is what other people say about you. Marketing is what you say about you, and PR is what other people say about you. It's probably the simplest way of doing it. I mean, obviously it has loads of other facets, but marketing would be placing an ad to say we're fucking great. PR is getting someone to say, I've tried this and they're fucking great. Obviously it's a bit deeper than that. Anyone in PR listening, we're like, oh, we do more than that. It's a lot more than that. But yeah.
And when you went freelance, was it still PR work that you were doing?
Yeah, it was. And I did PR and marketing to start with, which always makes me laugh now, because you imagine doing marketing as one thing. But I was working in an industry I knew. Lots of people knew me. So it was quite insular in what I was doing. I mean, I'll hold my hands up now. There's no way I could do any of that stuff in today's environment, because it was quite formulaic. It was quite, it's the same people all the time. It was quite easy to do. So it was quite an easy step. It was a good point in time, I think, to do it.
I know from your LinkedIn profile that you're involved in several things. You got to keep that interest going. The ADHD. I know one of the things that you have on your LinkedIn profile is that you're an ex-agency owner. So did you sell it? What happened there?
I literally shut the doors, because I'd got to, I think, probably about 2018, which was a couple of years before I shut it, and I'd really plateaued. I think at that point, the referrals were starting to dry up a little bit. I hadn't really moved with the times as much as I should have done. And I think my desire to grow wasn't there. But I also didn't have anyone in my corner. I had loads of people within the industry, but I didn't know anyone else who ran agencies who did what I did. And ironically, now I work within the agency space. But it is a little bit of, if I'd have known now what I knew then. So I really plateaued. And to be honest with you, I'd lost interest a little bit. And then come 2020, when COVID hit, it was just, I'll just shut up shop. I just sort of let my freelancers know, and we just kind of wound up. And both a good thing and a bad thing, I think. A good thing in the fact that it would have shut anyway. I had three kids to homeschool. But a bad thing in the fact that I shut the doors on the business. Then Boris announced that you could get this. You had a business, you could apply for last year. Well, I can shut the doors, didn't I? Sakes. But never mind.
Benefit of hindsight again.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I'd say, yeah, I didn't sell or anything like that. I never made much money. I lived in a world where I'd gone from being employed to a freelancer, and obviously with a decent amount of work, that's quite an increase in salary. And working with freelancers, the margins, I made good money. If you looked at it sort of from an agency perspective, the growth wasn't there, but that's not what I needed at the time. So,
and what occupies your time? I mean, obviously you've got 3 kids and a husband.
Mm-hmm.
There's all that. Outside of that, so perhaps from a work perspective, what occupies Laura now?
Now, I launched something called Agency Wise a couple of years ago, and it's a platform for agency founders and leaders to connect them. Talking about connections, to connect them with consultants or services, tools, platforms, whatever that will help them on their journey. The reason for that, or the kind of the rationale behind it, I spent a lot of time talking to founders. I was a founder advisor for a while. And what I found myself doing more and more, exactly what we were talking about, was I can't specifically help you with that, but I know someone who can. And so it was this constant kind of connecting people up, exactly what we're talking about in terms of great conversations. And so I thought there must be a kind of a way of doing this on a grander scale, a platform, if you like. Now I'm looking at it, it's not taken off the way I wanted. It's not monetized quite the way I wanted to do it. So it's in a pivot stage, I suppose. We always say that, don't we? The pivot stage. But my focus at the moment is myself and a couple of others are launching a CIC, which is Community Interest Company, in next year. The sole purpose is to kind of have a platform, have a space where agencies can, use us to raise money for charity. So we have a membership kind of model. So agencies pay a really small membership fee. We run events. We give agencies lots of materials, lots of tools, lots of resources so that they can do their own stuff. We have a voting system for the charities we support. And at the end of the year, we donate absolutely everything to charities. So all the profits go to charities that are chosen by our agency members. And honestly, the reason was I wake up quite a lot thinking I need to do more in the world. I think a lot of people who are having midlife crises do this. And the agency sort of environment is quite fragmented, but a lot of people want to do good stuff. To put it really bluntly, they want to do good stuff, and it's quite tricky. So it's really to kind of galvanise the community, bring us all together, and make as much money as we can for charity. Essentially.
What? I mean, I've got my idea what makes it tricky, but in your head, why is it tricky?
With a number of reasons, depending on your agency. Really, sometimes it's tricky because of time and resource. You want to be able to do stuff, but it's going to take time. It's going to take money. It's not easy to kind of do that.
Well, by do stuff, you mean like do a fundraising event or, yeah?
It's simple stuff, even, I'll let my staff go off and do stuff. It's time, money and resource. The other thing I think people really struggle with is they want to talk about it, but, LinkedIn's an absolute hellhole for this. You say anything, virtual you only did it to get on LinkedIn, even if you did it, so what? But then that's a difficult thing because people want to do stuff and they do want to do it because they want to encourage people to work for them, or they want to show clients they're good people, but they don't want to show that out loud. So actually having a collective that you can kind of get behind and shout about and talk about, because that's for the greater good, it is a good thing.
So the question that immediately comes to my mind is describe the ideal person for you to have a conversation with, which will help Agency Aid become the best possible thing that it could be? Who is that person?
There's lots of people, but so I'm going to give you a couple. So firstly, it's anyone who works in the agency space. So if you run an agency, work in an agency, even freelance, if you run a group of agencies, I want to talk to you because I want you to come and get involved. You know, the more agencies we have involved with this, the better it becomes. You know, it's a multiplying thing. There's maths behind it, but imagine, you know, the more you put in, the more that comes out. So anyone.
Sorry to cut across you, but we're getting to the nub of the whole thing here. Is you just in that you described vastly different kinds of people and organizations. How does that work?
So, ultimately, you know, from a business perspective, the point of being involved in this is, you know, to do great stuff, to raise money for charity, to maybe, you know, tick the CSR, you know, box, etc. But also, you know, this is a community we're building, the community of all agencies everywhere. So it's about people coming together as well. So there's a benefit for everyone working in the agency space, wherever it is.
So if I'm a freelancer and I'm a member of Agency Aid, you'll tell us in a bit how much that costs, I'm sure, then I'm going to benefit from being in there because I'm going to events where there will be founders of much larger marketing agencies that might need my freelance services, for example.
Exactly that. Or people at the next stage on from you can talk to. You know, we're not saying, you know, we're training. We're not saying we're specifically, you know, agency events in that perspective. It is much more on the sort of social side because, you know, there's lots of things you can do. But essentially, yeah, we're talking about the entire agency industry. So collectively, as we were saying earlier, having conversations with people, it is really great.
So that okay. There's also a lot of people. You gave us a broad spectrum of people. There's a lot of people in that broad spectrum. So let's narrow it down a little bit. You know, you've only got so much time to have conversations with people. So that's the first pass. So what's the second pass? So like we've got to find the three. Let's say there were three people. There are three people out there that if you were to have conversations with them over a sufficient period of time, that Agency Aid would be the best possible version that it could be.
So first of all, I think my kind of big one is I want to talk to people in the big agencies. You know, the people running it, our network is sort of mid-size agencies. So yeah, I want to talk to the people in the big agencies.
So give us some specific agencies or specific people.
Ogilvy, you know, someone who's got some sway there. Let's have a chat. Let's get Ogilvy involved. Let's get some of the big agencies involved in this because I think as an agency industry, you know, there are people who sit at the top. That's just the way the world works, right? And you know, there are people who everybody knows. So we want to get those people involved because I think firstly there's more sway. You know, there's more if big people involved, it feels more. I don't know. It feels more real. The second thing is obviously with people like that involved, there's more money behind. There's more sway behind. There's more people. This is all about numbers essentially. The more we get in, the more we can give away. That, you know, it is simple maths. So it's that. The second group of people I want to talk to is people who either work with or sell into the agency industry, because we also want to talk to people who want to partner with us. So, you know, there are people who want to, you know, get to speak to agencies or, you know, have got tools or services that agencies might use. We want to talk to you too, because we want to give our members some benefits. We want to get some sponsorship in for events. You know, there's lots of things we want from people who also want to talk to agencies. So, you know, at the end of the day, nobody's doing anything without some sort of business box ticked, and we get that. So, you know, but for us, in a crude way, you know, we want to get people in so that we can make as much money as possible for charity.
So you might have already answered this question inadvertently, but why are you doing this? Why is this so important to you at this particular point in your life?
Well, loads of people have asked me this, and I'm trying to think of really specific moments in time because there have been, but I don't want to drill it down to those specific moments because this is, it's a culmination. So the kind of the broad answer is I really want to do more for people who need it. You know, whatever that is, I want to do more. I feel like I don't do very much in my life, and I feel I'm privileged enough to be able to do it. So that's one. But I've also seen over the last couple of years, small charities. A good friend of mine's son was severely injured, paralysed from the neck down recently, and they've done loads of fundraisers to get him home essentially. And I really started to see what a little bit of community, a little bit of kind of galvanizing people together, the impact that can have. And actually, it feels not easy, but it feels doable if you just do it. And I think that's really hit me recently. My sister volunteers at a local charity, and just getting myself and a couple of other people involved in it too has made a massive difference already. And I just think, this is a big industry. There's a lot of people want to do some good stuff. That's why I want to do it. There's so many people that we can help. Let's do it.
Right. And how's it going?
It's going okay. I think our biggest problem, as we've talked about, is really getting the message out there. When I talk to people directly, they're in. We're involved. We're in. But it is kind of cutting through the noise and really kind of getting people to see what we're doing and understand what we're doing and respond to what we're doing. Because if you can't say it in less than 4 words now, I've already lost interest. You know what it's like.
So what are your 4 words then? I know.
Hang on. Give us your money. No, I might need to work on that if I'm honest. But yeah, I mean that is the biggest problem. With a lot of things, once the message is out, it will snowball. And with this, it will be a case of that. And our ambition, our mission is to be the place where agency charity works. We're going to report on what we donate. We're going to report on the donations of the industry as a whole. We want to be synonymous with agency charitable giving, and I think it's completely achievable. But it's getting
Would a conversation with the leadership of Sport Aid and Comic Relief would that help you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think any kind of help and advice and any kind of support we can get. I mean, bearing in mind this is being run by people who this is not the full-time job. We've got volunteer trustees coming on board, but nobody is running this as their full-time job. So help and advice is absolutely welcomed. And the other thing is this is democratic in essence. There are 3 of us who set up the CIC, but we're not saying we know what we're doing. This is my idea. We're being run by other people as well. So yeah, any advice, any help, any support from anyone, I'm open to listening. Because I think I want to get it right, essentially.
So what's the question that you can give me and the listener to ask someone that we're in conversation with? I possibly have more conversations than most normal people because it's my job, it's what I do. What question can you give me and the listener that will either plant the seed or almost impel the person who hears the question to want to contact you? What's your conversation magnet?
Oh, you should have sent this in an email for me to think about, because that's not very fair. How long a pause can we get out here?
As long as you want.
And do you know why I'm finding this difficult? And this is actually is a good point. So the first question is, can someone help me with this question? Get in contact. But the reason I find this question so difficult is because it's not one thing. It's not, I don't feel like we have a hook that sort of gets everybody involved, because like I said, everybody we're trying to get involved is different. They come, they want, hopefully they want to do this for different reasons. It's really difficult to have one question, do you want to do good in the world? Oh, it's too vague, Are you an agency that wants to give back? Well, I already do, because I do this. There isn't, that's why I'm finding it difficult. And even on our kind of, our marketing material and stuff at the moment, we're still trying to find that thing that we are. So yeah, I'm going to get back to you. I'll record it and I'll you just slot it in there. I think for me, it's about, people who want to be involved in something that will hopefully be a really great movement, in terms of giving to charity, in terms of charitable giving within the agency sector, because it can grow and change, it can morph, and it can be huge. But we need people to come and get involved with it in the first instance. And it isn't one thing. Come talk to me. Tell me what you think. How do you want to be involved?
Have a conversation with me.
Have a conversation with me. I mean, most of the people I've spoken to probably in the last month have given me an idea of sorts that we've then incorporated. So it's that as well. It's not just do you like what we're doing? Do you want to be involved? It's also, have you got any other ideas?
Well, this conversation is absolutely case in point, because the first time we met was on a call where you were all very kind of secretive and stuff on LinkedIn about what was going on. We had a call as soon as I heard about Agency Aid, Activate Your Podcast, signed up as a founding partner. And we've arranged for this episode to go out on New Year's Day, and you decided to launch now in February. So yeah, thanks for fucking up my schedule.
You know what? Well, do you know what? I think this is indicative of age. This is something that agencies will love. Okay, we're launching here. No, we're not. We're launching. No, hold on. That was a soft launch. Call it beta.
Anyway, and putting yours and Chris Bantock, you've not mentioned him by name, but he's one of the three that's set up the CIC. Your episodes of the Not a Straight Line podcast are coming out on the 1st and the 8th of January as part of, these are the humans that are behind Agency Aid, because as we've discussed and agreed on this conversation, it's those personal connections which make the difference.
Well, I think as well, I mean, it's not the reason it's also about people and us as people at the moment is because this is untested, this is new. So there has to be an element of not trust, but there has to be an element of, I want to be involved with you. I want to be able to see that you're doing it for the right reason. I want to be able to see that it'll be successful and there's passion behind it, not just because I want it to work, but because that's what it needs. You're not going to sign up for something that's a bit, So it needs that. And I think that's the thing that Chris and I, when we have conversations, it really comes across. But doing that in an email or a LinkedIn post is really, really tricky. So, I agree with you entirely. I have to have conversations.
I'm pretty confident that we could craft a conversation magnet out of this conversation, which would give you more of the kind of conversations which you want to make Agency Aid successful.
How many times a day do you think you say the word conversation?
Well, have I said it too many times for you?
You need another word for it. Chat.
It's the lifeblood of communication. Is the lifeblood of relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Relationships are the lifeblood of life, and you don't get to communicate with another human unless you're in conversation with them. So I just think it's a fundamental skill. And you talked earlier about, like, there's some people that aren't very good at it. I believe that it can be a learned skill, that there are aspects of having a good conversation with people that can be taught. It's about presence. It's about attention. It's about listening. And that's ultimately, I mean, as I'm talking aloud now, I think a lot of those skills for me come from my acting training, that when you're on stage with someone, you have to listen, you have to be present, you have to pay attention, because if you don't, you're not going to hit your cue or whatever. But I think those skills applied to this innately and really only human activity. Animals don't get in conversation with each other in
as
a way
far as we're aware.
As far as that we're aware.
But no, I agree. I mean, I think conversations are obviously, communication is everything, and there's loads of different ways of communicating. I think that the thing with conversation, though, is like I said, it's not just getting what you want from it, it's also understanding what the other person wants from it. I think for me, the people who are the worst at conversation, there's two people who are the worst at conversation. One is the person who just has just their own agenda and just talks at you and isn't interested. And the other person is someone who is completely unaware of their surroundings, hasn't tapped into that. They're the worst, and again, that comes back to understanding who you're talking to and listening and that sort of thing, and it doesn't matter what those people say. As soon as they show those traits, you stop listening. So, as I said, you think of your outcomes, but also think about, what does the other person want to get from me? What do I want to get from them? It doesn't have to be stilted.
I think we've got the formula possibly is for a good quality conversation is who do you want to speak to? You get really clear about that. And I hope you're a little bit further along in terms of clarity about who would be the absolute, if you could just have 3 more conversations with 3 people that would make Agency Aid just, oh my God, just can't even think about the success that it would be. Right. So the who, what's your outcome? What do you want to achieve both for you and them? How do you, the way I approach it is before every conversation I have, you made me really self-conscious about saying the word conversation now. For every chat that I have, for every time I engage in meaningful discourse with another human being, how about that?
One of the things I do is I find people's word when they talk. Everybody's got a word that they say loads.
Yeah, I pick.
And actually, yours isn't conversation, but conversation's funny. But anyway,
what's mine?
No, I don't know.
I hear it in other people. Yeah, so we got the who, get really specific on who and who you want to be in conversation with.
Yeah.
What is your outcome? So for me, the what is two things. What is your outcome in having the conversation? And the other side of that is, what do you want the other person to feel when, as a result of that conversation? So one of the things that I think is teachable is, before every conversation I have, whether it be for the podcast or a sales call, whatever, is I've recorded a little mantra to myself about the state that I want to elicit in the person I'm about to have a conversation with, just to kind of set my own kind of mindset with that. So we got the who, we got the what, and then we got the why. Why are you having the conversation?
Yeah, exactly. And just anecdotally, quite a few years ago, I was at a networking event, and there was someone that everybody wanted to talk to. You know, the person that everyone's gone to talk to. And everybody was telling this guy, his name is Simon, what they do, why he should talk to them. And he stood next to me. So I decided to tell him I was a blimp pilot and that I'd crashed. I've actually used this since, actually. And that I'd crashed outside, and that I'd just come in because it was cold and I wanted a drink. And I stuck with it until right at the end of the night. And then I gave him my card, and he called me the next day because he needed to know what I did. And like, I'm not suggesting everybody does that, but the point of what I'm saying there is, the outcome I wanted was to speak to him, but I could see everybody was doing this. So it was just taking a different, and I'm not suggesting that one works all the time, it really doesn't, but just in that instance, you know, the outcome for me, what I wanted him to do was be interested in me, you know? So yeah, just anecdotally.
We've been chatting for over an hour and a half, minus your loo stops and your drink stops. No, you haven't been. You've only drink stops, but that's cool. And also that gap that we gave while you were thinking about the answer to the question. But apart from all that, we've been talking for an hour and a half. So just as we kind of think about wrapping it all up, we've kind of touched on the answer to this question. But how can the listener and I help you the most right now, Laura?
Honestly, the best way at the moment is if you know anyone who works in the agency industry, if you operate in the agency industry, get in touch, try and find out what we're doing, you know, have a conversation with me, have a conversation with people who work in the agency industry, and you know, get in touch, because we're at this stage with Agency Aid where, you know, we're launching, but we need people to be talking about it. We need to grow in terms of engagement and people talking about it. So drop me a line, drop Chris a line.
And I guess maybe if you're only 1 or 2 degrees of separation away from the chief executive of Ogilvy or one of these other larger agencies.
Yeah, tell them to drop me a line, definitely.
And how can they start a conversation with you?
I mean, I'm on LinkedIn, but I've got a common name, Laura West. So if you can't find me on there, can I give my email address?
You can do everything you want.
I can do anything I want. I'll give my home address. So my email is laura@agency-wise.co.uk. So drop me a line and find me on LinkedIn. You know, I'm sure you can find me. It's I'm findable, honestly.
So if you put in Laura West and Agency Aid, or Laura West and Agency Wise,
yes,
then you probably
all of those things will come up for sure. Yeah. And drop me a line. And yeah, like you say, you know, tell other people, ask if they know about it. Because even if you're not in a position to be involved, being an advocate, being a voice, being someone who shares it is as valuable at this stage. So, and we are having a launch party at some point. So who doesn't have a party?
Talking about parties, what have you got planned for Christmas?
You know what? Not much. My birthday's Christmas Day, and so lots of people go, "Oh, do you want to do something for your birthday?" And no, I don't. I'm quite miserable with this. I don't really like Christmas because it's just a lot. So we're hosting this year on Christmas Day, and then we've essentially lied to everyone and said we're busy throughout the rest of the period using others. But we're seeing them, and we're seeing none of them. So hopefully they won't listen to this.
Well, if they do, it'll be after the event.
Yeah, exactly. So, sorry, yeah. But yeah, and so not too much actually. But yeah, I'm turning another year older on Christmas Day. So, oh well, never mind.
And any future exciting travel plans?
No, do you know what? Not with travel, actually. I'm in an iron about travel next year because travel's really hard now. The 16-year-old doesn't want to come away with us, weirdly. I don't know why. My middle daughter struggles quite a lot with traveling, being autistic. And my 6-year-old is just a pain in the arse, quite frankly. So, I mean, the ideal would be for me and Peter to go away, but yeah. Do you want to look after our kids for a week? That's the outcome of this conversation is
Okay, right. So
I'm here.
now it's clear.
Yeah. Yeah, listener, if you want to look after my kids for a week, drop me a line.
It's been this conversation has exceeded my expectations. I knew it would be a good one. I just really appreciate your openness and willingness to share all the different little bits of your non-straight line. Yeah, your zigs and zags. It's been great. Is there any part of your zigzag journey which we haven't touched on that you think would be particularly inspiring or helpful for the listener?
Like I said earlier, like a lot of what I've done, or a lot of my zigs and zags, which I've maybe not called them that before, but my changes, I've maybe looked back and thought, oh, I did it for the wrong reason, or I was forced, or it wasn't a positive thing. But I think any kind of change in your life, whether you've done it or whether it's happened to you, that's happened. That is the way it is, and just kind of move forward from that and make as much positive from it as possible, because you can do the whole thing of if we had parallel timelines and stuff, but we haven't, and that's not how life works. So, and I'm not one of these people who believes in, sadly, ask the universe and it'll give, or mantras, or fate or anything like that. But I am someone who believes in, it is what it is. It's happened. Just make the best of it now and ask for help. So, for me, my zigs and zags, I've never seen them like that. Only now in this conversation have I. But I'm sure if we have this conversation again in a year, I'll be like, guess what I'm doing now? I might be a blimp pilot.
Blimp pilot.
Yeah, that's the one.
How can we not end on that? Something that did come up on the Not a Straight Line chat that I had with the guest yesterday was maybe that is an opportunity to revisit particular guests, and listeners to the podcast can vote who they want to kind of have to come back.
Yes, I like that. I really like that. Yeah. It's like location when they go back and then they're still living in the same house and they just look older, more miserable, and they've got more kids. Always a good episode. Always makes me laugh. It's been 12 years. Oh.
Time. So at the end of every episode, I do ask each guest, and I kind of gave a bit of a nod to this earlier on in our chat. Whose non-straight line journey do you want to hear?
Oh, you did say you were going to ask me that as well. Oh, that is such a good question. Do you know who you should talk to, actually? Talk to Lyndon Nicholson of Future Group. So I met him maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And he is, for me, someone who you think is one way and he's another way. And he is a really nice guy, but a very driven guy. But he's got some great stories. He's got some quite zigzaggy stories of where he's been. So he's quite a good person to talk to.
And what was his name again?
Lyndon Nicholson.
Lyndon Nicholson.
But don't put that out in case he doesn't want to.
But are you able to introduce us?
Yes.
Do you know him that well? Okay. Yeah. But if you're able to introduce me, and you think that Lyndon would enjoy a conversation like this?
He probably would, yeah. Yeah. All right, I'll introduce you to him, yeah. But there's loads of people, actually, I think, now I'm thinking about it. Oh, speak to Sabrina Chavain. Do you know who she is?
No.
Okay, speak to Sabrina Chavain as well. I can introduce you to her.
Okay.
Okay. I could go on.
All right. Two. Well, I know I sometimes struggle to get one out, so I've got
I've got loads now.
Two for the price of one. That's great. It's amazing. Yeah, that's it. Cool. That's all right. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Not a Straight Line. If this conversation helped to reorient your internal compass or inspired you in any way, please let us know by heading to podcast.notastraightline.life/rate and leave a rating and review. Thanks as always to Matthew Bliss of MB Podcast Services for his exquisite engineering of this episode. If you'd like him to help you with your podcast, contact details are in the show notes. And if you'd like to be a guest on the show, or there's someone whose non-straight line journey you'd just love to hear, then please visit podcast.notastraightline.life/guest. Thanks for being here with me, and I'll see you next week for another amazing, deep, inspiring non-straight line journey. Love you.